Well, it's from the life course family perspective. I think that cohabitation, increasing cohabitation, both in the Mediterranean countries, maybe even beginning to see some in the wealthier Asian countries, certainly in some of the Eastern European countries, is really what has changed the family most. And I have always believed that the second demographic transition was much more about the changes in partnership behavior than it is about low fertility. So when I write about the second demographic transition, I'm mostly writing about the stability of unions, of partnerships, and their relationship to childbearing. Because it may be that because unions are less and less stable and it's harder to form unions, that contributes to low fertility. But I don't think it's part of the same individualization process. I agree that everyone continues to express the desire for 2 or more children. Virtually everyone, except maybe in Austria. And not in China either, but that's a unique situation. So people are at replacement level in what they think is a good family. Children are too costly to have 3 or more unless you have a really good economic basis. But cohabitation represents a less stable union than marriage. It's not that marriage gives you magic dust that makes you love each other more. It reflects the magic dust that is already there. The strong relationship, the maturity, the ability to work things out, and maybe to have made the right choice in the first place. So once that happens, people marry. People feel freer from the start. They know they don't have to stay with this person the rest of their lives. Maybe they don't take as much care under these circumstances, but I do think because it's now acceptable, even in the Mediterranean countries, very high acceptance of separation and divorce because people understand it's difficult to live with somebody. Everybody's hard to live with. They say some of us are worth it, but I think it's more everybody's hard to live with, and some of us are more committed to trying to figure out how to deal with those difficulties. Generally, it's slightly negative. So I've done some work with microsimulation to imagine populations where nobody separates, or populations where everybody separates and then finds a new partner while they're still under 40 and could still have children. And it turns out that if you have this imaginary population where everyone stays together, they have more children. They end up with, in the moderate or low fertility countries, but they end up with two, maybe not quite 2.1, but almost, which is the replacement level. But when and if you had a society in which everyone separated and then they didn't find a new partner, you would be down to having maybe 1.5 children per woman. But in most of these situations with high separation rates, they happen after childbearing, they happen, so you already have one child, they happen in the childbearing years, you find a new partner, you're still young, the new partners want to have a child together. And in a lot of research I've shown that there is this extra bonus in a stepfamily of having a common child. And so what you get in some couples, say you already had 2 children in your first partnership, and you never planned to have 3, but you have a new partner, so you end up with 3, or 4, or maybe 5. So there are some people who are producing these extra children, but it still doesn't make up for the fact that many of these people do not find a new partner, or even if they do, their children are already teenagers and they don't want to start over. Or maybe even their children are already 8 or 9 and they say, I'm too old to have a baby in the house. the government can set up very strong incentives to marry by giving married couples bonuses or giving them better access to housing or providing some kind of special. I'm trying to think of things government could do. They could make it illegal to have certain, you would have certain taxation, for example, that you get when you're married, you don't get when you're cohabiting, although in many situations it's more favorable to cohabit than to marry. But that could be set up. But I don't think that's going to have any effect on the well-being of these relationships and people's ideas about whether they can leave if the relationship isn't satisfactory. I think the only politically sensible thing that governments could do is to provide young people in the childbearing ages with stable employment or good ladders towards stable employment so they can afford to have children and have the work-life balance, have parental leave, have child care. In these situations, I think those relationships, whether they're formalized by marriage or not, will be more stable. And those stable relationships will produce slightly more children, not necessarily more than two, but slightly.